The saloon stank of spilled whiskey, sweat, and rain-soaked dust. The floorboards moaned beneath the weight of too many boots, and the air inside was loud with laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains like a warning no one heard. 3 girls stood on a makeshift platform of crates and rotted planks. No one had told them to stand there. But when the man with the gold tooth pointed, they climbed up. Barefoot. Silent. Taught long ago that silence bought them less pain. The eldest, 17, held her chin high, though her lower lip bled from where a ringed hand had struck her earlier. Her hair was wet and tangled down her back, the sleeves of her homespun dress torn at the shoulder. The middle sister, 15, stood slightly behind, one hand gripping the youngest's. That one was only 12. Too small to be in a place like this. Too small to know the full weight of what was about to happen. The crowd, men in long dusters with half-laced boots and slurred tongues, gathered close. Tankards slapped tables. Coins clinked. The saloon's lanterns threw flickering light across the warped wood walls, making the girls look like ghosts in the grain. "She's a bit scrawny," one man said, gesturing at the youngest with a muddy boot. "But I reckon she'll fatten up on stew and chores." "She's a child," the eldest snapped. That got the crowd riled. Laughter roared. The saloon owner, a thick-jowled man with greasy sideburns and a belt made of silver bullets, lifted his hands. "Easy now, boys. Let's not ruin the show." He turned to the girls with mock sweetness. "See, these little darlings were left to me in good faith. Their daddy owed me a month of horses, and then had the misfortune of gambling with his liver instead of his brains. Didn't he die in the street?" someone called. The saloon keeper grinned. "Face first in horse piss. Took my money with him. But lucky me he had collateral." The crowd murmured. Some clapped. A few looked away. The eldest girl's voice shook, but she raised it anyway. "We are not cattle." The saloon owner smirked. "No, sweetheart. Cattle are worth more." The middle sister flinched, pulling the youngest closer. The youngest had said nothing all evening. Her wide eyes flicked from face to face like a deer scenting wolves. A slow hush began to fall over the crowd, not from respect, but from anticipation. The bidding would begin soon. That part always quieted the room. And then came the door. It slammed open with such force the hinges screamed. Rain lashed in behind the figure that stood silhouetted against the storm, tall, broad-shouldered, with a coat soaked dark from the downpour. His hat was low, casting shadow over his face, but the silver at his belt glinted. No one moved. The saloon owner cleared his throat. "Evenin', stranger. You come for whiskey or company?" The figure didn't answer. He stepped forward, boots sloshing as water dripped from his duster. He scanned the room with slow, unreadable eyes, taking in every man, every corner, every gesture that paused midair. Then he looked up at the platform. The girls didn't speak, but the middle one gripped her sisters harder. "You bidding?" the saloon owner asked, chuckling to mask the tension. "Or just here to watch the show?" The man moved to the center of the room. He dropped a small leather pouch on the floor. It hit with a heavy clunk. Silver coins spilled across the warped floorboards. "You'll let them go?" he said. His voice was low, steady. It carried. The owner chuckled. "Friend, I think you're confused about how this works. These girls are spoken for." The man didn't blink. "By who?" "Me," a red-faced settler said, stepping forward. "And 2 of my boys here." The man turned toward him. "Then you'll unspeak it." The room froze. The settler reached for his belt. He wasn't fast enough. The rancher's revolver came out like a whisper, and suddenly the settler's hand was empty, his gun sliding across the floor. The hammer had been cocked but never fired. The threat alone hollowed out the room. "You gonna shoot over a few brats?" another man asked, his hand hovering near his own holster. "I'll shoot over the principle," the rancher said. "And the principle is simple. A man doesn't sell girls. Not on my watch." The saloon keeper laughed, though his voice cracked. "This ain't your watch, stranger." The rancher turned. His eyes, for the first time, met the eldest sister's. "You got names?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not ones you'll buy." "Good," he said. "I'm not buying." Something in his voice, like old gravel worn down by wind and time, settled the tremble in her hands. The room felt smaller. The walls closer. "This here's illegal," the saloon keeper barked. "They're in my care. They're daddy's signatures in that ledger." The man walked slowly to the counter. He looked at the ledger, then reached into his coat. A moment of panic. Then he pulled out a folded letter. "This one's from the circuit judge in Dry Wells. He heard rumors about this place. About what you do here. This says I've got authority to investigate and to remove anyone being held against their will. The saloon keeper snatched the paper, read it, and swore. You forged this. The rancher shrugged. You could try telling the judge that. Or the marshal if you'd rather wait. The room shifted again. Some of the men began to back away. One tipped his hat to the girls. Another muttered an apology under his breath as he left. The saloon owner's bluster was gone. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Get off that crate, the rancher said, looking to the sisters. The middle one moved first. Then the youngest, who grabbed the eldest's hand. The eldest hesitated. What do you want from us? She asked. The rancher replied without hesitation. Nothing. She narrowed her eyes. Then why? He looked past her for a second at something no one else could see. Because someone should have done it sooner. They stepped down. As they passed the saloon keeper, the eldest girl turned and spat near his boot. The rancher led them out, one hand on the pistol at his hip, the other holding the saloon doors open. Rain poured down like baptism. The youngest girl looked up at him through the curtain of water. What's your name? He didn't answer. Just led them through the mud, past the stables, toward a horse waiting alone with no saddle. The wind picked up, and behind them the saloon sat still, like something caught in the moment before a storm breaks open. Out there, beyond the town, there was nothing but dust, hills, and silence. But for the first time in a long while, the girls didn't walk into it alone. The horse carried no saddle, just a worn blanket and leather bridle. No bags, no gear, no provisions, only the man who sat it like a shadow riding west. The three girls followed on foot, quiet as ghosts, the youngest limping slightly from a blister that had split open in her heel. The eldest hadn't spoken since they left the saloon. The rain had stopped, but its weight still hung in the air, heavy and damp as regret. They crested a low hill as dusk bled into a flat, bruised horizon. A hawk wheeled overhead, calling out once before diving into a silent canyon below. The land was wide and waiting. The road they followed barely counted as one, just two ruts through grass and gravel, veering toward nothing visible. Where are we going? The middle sister finally asked. The man didn't turn. Home. Yours? She said. He nodded once. If that's all right. The eldest stepped forward, placing herself between the man and the others. And if it's not? He pulled the horse to a stop, dismounted, faced her. You're free to walk anywhere you like, he said, his tone level. But the next town's 6 days by foot. This one here, he added, motioning gently to the youngest, won't make it halfway without food or shelter. If you stay with me, I'll feed you. I'll protect you. That's all. Her eyes didn't soften. You expect us to believe you're some kind of saint? No, he said. I expect you to believe I'm tired of graves. They didn't ask more after that. The house came into view near midnight. A modest ranch tucked into a slope of dry pine and rock, with a narrow porch sagging beneath its own weight. The windows were dark. No light but the stars. Inside, the air smelled of ash and old bread. A kettle sat on the hearth, long cooled. A single wool blanket had been folded and left on a wooden bench. No woman's touch. No photographs save one. A faded tintype of a man in uniform, a woman beside him, pregnant and laughing, her hand resting on his chest. The girls hovered in the doorway. The man lit a lantern and gestured to a corner near the fire. You can sleep there. The floor's clean. What about you? The middle one asked. He sat down near the door, leaned his back against the wall, and unbuckled his belt gun. I'll be right here. They didn't trust him. Not yet. But something about the way he rested, arms folded, head tilted back like a man who hadn't slept in years, made them believe he wouldn't harm them that night. The eldest girl lay with her eyes open, watching the ceiling. The youngest curled up against her. The middle sister stayed close to the hearth, eyes flicking between the man and the shadows under the door. At some point sleep took them. By morning the man was gone. The lantern still burned low. The door creaked open not long after. He returned with a tin of milk and a loaf of dry bread. Eat, he said simply. They did, cautious but starving. As they ate, he opened the shutters. Light flooded the room, gold and quiet. A field stretched beyond the house, dotted with tufts of stubborn green. A barn slouched to one side, more collapsed than upright. The roof had holes like open mouths. You live here alone? The eldest asked. He nodded. Why? He didn't answer. The day passed without much talk. He worked the broken fence, hammering it back into line. The girls stayed near the house. Watched, waited, tried not to hope. That evening, the middle sister approached him with a question she'd been holding since the saloon. You really got a paper from the judge? He drove another nail before replying. No. You lied. He looked up at her. Would you rather I hadn't? She said nothing, then turned and walked away. Later, the youngest found a chicken egg in the grass and brought it inside like treasure. The man boiled it for her. She offered him half. He smiled, barely, and shook his head. That night, as the wind whispered through broken window frames, the eldest sat across from him while the others slept. You keep looking at the photo, she said. He didn't deny it. Was that your wife? He nodded. What happened? Pregnancy fever. Took her and the child. The fire cracked. Silence held for a long while. I'm sorry, she said. He didn't look at her. You look like her when you're mad. She stiffened, unsure if it was a compliment or something else. I'm not staying here to fill some memory, she said. I know. She rose to go. But before she reached the pallet, he said quietly, You don't owe me gratitude. You owe me nothing. I don't expect you to trust me. Just to rest a while until you can stand on your own feet again. She turned back. What's your name? Dane. She nodded once. Mine's not Brat. In case you were wondering. I figured, he said and let her go. Over the next days a rhythm grew between them. Not peace, not yet. But something that looked like it might become peace given time. The barn creaked less under his repairs. The girls began helping in small ways, clearing sticks, pulling weeds, warming water for washing. The youngest started humming when she swept the porch. The middle sister stitched a torn sleeve from the man's old coat and left it folded on a chair without a word. The eldest wandered the fields alone sometimes. She stood in the wind, her back straight, her hair tied up like a grown woman's, watching the horizon like she expected it to betray her. And on the fifth night, when a coyote howled too close to the house, all three sisters startled awake, but none of them screamed. They looked across the room. Dane was already standing at the door, rifle in hand. He didn't speak. He just waited there until the sound faded and the night settled once more. By morning, there was something different in the way the eldest girl stirred the fire. A weight slightly lifted. Her shoulders sat lower. Her jaw wasn't clenched. She passed him a tin mug of coffee without being asked. He took it, sipped, and finally spoke the words he'd been holding. You got people who'll come after you? The eldest met his eyes. Not people worth fearing. I think they disagree. She shrugged. Let him try. That made him smile, just a flicker but real. The quiet held. The sky deepened to orange. And though neither said it, both understood that this, whatever it was, wouldn't stay safe for long. Not in a land like this. Not with men like the ones left behind in town. But for now the house held warmth. And for now that was enough. It began with small things. A spoon left by the wash basin. A girl's shawl folded and placed on the porch rail before the wind could take it. A bowl of beans set at the head of the table even when no one asked for it. These weren't acts of gratitude. They were acts of adaptation. A shifting of weight. A new rhythm in a house long built for only one heartbeat. Dane noticed the silence first. Not the absence of noise but the absence of waiting. 4 days the girls had walked like deer, ears sharp, eyes wide. Now the middle one hummed while shelling peas on the porch. The youngest had begun talking in her sleep, soft, half-formed things about bread and someone named Ruth. Even the eldest, who still watched Dane like he might grow claws, no longer stiffened when he passed behind her. He didn't mean to care. Didn't plan for it. But something in him began to bend. He'd gone years without company. Years without voices in the house that weren't echoes. His days had been shaped by fence posts and livestock, weather reports he muttered to himself, letters he never sent. He'd forgotten what a shared meal sounded like. What it meant for a house to hold other people's breath. They arrived like stray seeds on wind, and already they were growing roots. One morning, while patching the barn roof, Dane heard laughter. Startled, he paused, hammer in midair. It came again, clear, full, and entirely out of place. He climbed down and found the youngest chasing a chicken around the yard, her arms flapping like wings. The middle sister leaned against the porch rail, laughing so hard she had to hold her sides. He didn't speak, just watched. Let the sound settle in his chest like rain after a dry season. The eldest stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. She's not a pet, she said. I know. She'll be disappointed when it runs off. She's had worse disappointments. The girl nodded once, then added softly, haven't we all? That night, she found Dane outside near the well, oiling the hinges on the gate. The moon hung heavy and full. A coyote howled in the far distance, too far to matter. My name's Lacey, she said. I figure you ought to know it. Dane glanced at her. All right. The middle one's now. And the little one is Mercy. Fitting, he said. Is it? He didn't answer, just went back to the hinges. But something about the way he stood shifted. Lacey lingered. You never said why you brought us here. He stopped, lowered the oil can, and stared into the dark. I don't know. That's not the truth. He sighed. Maybe not. Maybe I just saw something that shouldn't be and I couldn't walk away. That it? No, he admitted. Maybe I was tired of pretending my house was still a home. Lacey said nothing for a long while. Then, barely above a whisper, You think we make it one? He turned and their eyes met. I think you already have. The days continued. Dane began teaching Nell how to set traps for rabbits. She had quick fingers and a quicker mind. Mercy took to following him like a pup, curious, stubborn, asking questions about everything from fence wire to stars. Lacey kept her distance, but not entirely. She began tending the small garden he'd let go wild, pulling weeds with a vengeance, muttering under her breath like she was in conversation with the earth itself. It was Lacey who found the letter. It had slipped from a tin box Dane kept hidden beneath a floorboard in the barn. She wasn't snooping, she was reaching for a spare bucket when the wood gave slightly, and the box slid loose. She didn't open it, just picked up the envelope with the frayed corner and stared at the name written in a woman's hand. To my Dane, if I go before the sun returns. She held it a long time. When Dane found her later, she didn't mention it. But her eyes were different. Less flint, more shadow. That night, she didn't sleep near the hearth like usual. She moved her pallet closer to the door, between Dane and the wind. He noticed. Said nothing. The next morning a horse arrived. A stranger on a dun mare, long coat, mouth too wide when he smiled. He dismounted slowly, letting the dust rise around him. You Dane? He asked. Dane stepped out onto the porch, rifle slung over one shoulder. Depends who's asking. Name's Cutter. I knew their daddy. Played cards with him once or twice in dry wells. Dane didn't move. What do you want? Well, I heard a tale about 3 girls going missing. Heard they ended up here. Figured someone might pay handsomely to get him back. Or hurt you if you don't. Inside, Mercy peeked through the curtain. Lacey stepped behind her, silent as breath. Dane's voice didn't rise. They're not going anywhere. Cutter laughed. Didn't figure you'd be reasonable. He turned his horse slowly. But men are riding this way, mister. They aim to collect what they think is theirs. You best be ready. Then he rode off, slow enough to show he wasn't afraid. Dane watched him disappear down the ridge. Then turned and saw Lacey standing behind him. They'll come, won't they? Yes. She looked at the horizon like it might answer. Then we better be ready. That night, the girls helped drag wood to barricade the windows. Dane checked the rifles, cleaned the pistols, laid out ammunition. Nell asked questions, how to aim, how to reload. Mercy sat on the floor counting bullets. Lacey stood in the doorway looking out into the dark. You didn't want this fight, she said. No, Dane replied. But I won't run from it. She nodded, then turned to him, her face unreadable. You're not the man I thought you were. Disappointed? No, she said. Worried what I'll become if I start believing men like you still exist. He didn't answer. Just reached for the rifle and checked its sights. In the corner, Mercy spoke suddenly. Are we staying? Dane looked at her. At her round face, still bruised faintly from town. At the way she sat straight back now, unafraid to meet his eyes. Yes, he said. Lacey watched him. Then maybe it's time we stop preparing to leave. The dust showed before the men did. It rose in a thin column over the ridge, drifting like smoke from an old wound. Dane spotted it just past dawn while stacking firewood beside the porch. He didn't flinch. Just straightened, squinted into the horizon, and quietly said, They're coming. Lacey appeared behind him, hands still damp from washing the morning dishes. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Inside, Nell grabbed the rifle Dane had taught her to load. Mercy stood in the middle of the room, unmoving as if she could freeze time with stillness. Her small fists curled at her sides. She didn't cry. By noon, they counted 4 riders. One of them wore a red bandana over his face. Another had a sheriff's star pinned crookedly to his vest. At the center rode a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard, scar above his brow, and an unmistakable limp. Their uncle. Lacey saw him and spat in the dirt. Bastard used to beat our mama. Called her excess weight. Dane nodded once, jaw tight. You don't need to talk to him. I plan to do more than talk. The riders halted just beyond the fence line. Dust settled around their boots as they dismounted. They didn't call out right away. just stood there, sizing up the quiet house, the patchy barn, the thin curls of smoke rising from the chimney. Dane stepped forward, rifle across his shoulder, hat low. His voice came out steady. You lost. The man with the limp chuckled. No. But I'd say you're about to be. You've got no claim here. The man took off his hat, revealing a face lined like dried leather. That right? Seems to me these girls belong to kin. I'm their blood. You're filth, Lacey said from behind Dane. And blood means nothing when you let your own starve. He glanced at her, no shame in his eyes. You've always had a mouth too big for your face. Dane stepped between them. You say you're family, yet you sold them off to the highest drunk. You think that still counts as blood? The sheriff-looking man stepped forward, voice oily. We've come for what's owed. Law's on our side. Dane looked at the crooked badge. That badge don't shine like it used to. And it won't save you. The man with the limp nodded once. All right then. We take them or we take your land. Either way, this ends today. Dane didn't move. Not today. He turned and walked back toward the porch. The men chuckled, mistaking the calm for retreat. Then they heard the sound of the front door opening. Lacey stepped out, rifle slung across her back, fire in her eyes. Nell followed with her hands stained from gun oil. Mercy walked beside her, holding a slingshot and a stone in each pocket. The sight of the girls standing there, unafraid, stopped the laughter cold. The man with the limp spat. You trained him? You really that lonely? No, Dane said. Just surrounded by women who got more grit than you ever did. The shooting started before anyone meant it to. The sheriff figure twitched first, drawing iron with a curse. Dane's rifle cracked, and the man dropped where he stood, the badge still catching sunlight as his chest hit dirt. The other two dove for cover behind the fence. Bullets splintered the rails. Lacey crouched low, fired twice, missed once. Nell took aim, teeth gritted so tight her jaw pulsed. The man with the limp tried to circle the barn. Mercy, hidden behind the water barrel, saw him. She lifted her slingshot, aimed without trembling, and let the stone fly. It cracked hard against his temple. He stumbled, just long enough for Dane to reach him. The rifle swung like a hammer. Bone cracked. The man hit the ground with a groan, bleeding into dust. Silence returned in pieces. The wind carried smoke away from the yard. The last man crawled backward, arms shaking, face pale as linen. Dane walked toward him. You walk away now, he said, voice like low thunder, and you tell every man between here and the saloon that these girls ain't for sale. They're not yours. They're not anyone's. And if you come back, you won't crawl away next time. The man dropped his pistol, nodded once, and staggered toward the horses. Dane turned to the others. Mercy was shaking but still standing. Nell had a tear trailing down one cheek. Lacey lowered her rifle slowly, her breath ragged but controlled. She looked at him, fierce and flushed. They won't stop. They'll hesitate, he replied. Then what? Then we outlast them. That night no one ate much. But they sat together anyway. Close. As if the danger had bound them tighter instead of tearing them apart. Dane stood on the porch afterward, watching the moon rise clean and full. Lacey joined him, her arms crossed over her chest, hair loose for the first time. You never asked for this, she said. No, he answered. But maybe it's what I needed. She looked out over the quiet fields. They'll come again. Yes. And if they bring more guns? Then I'll stand with you, he said. Just like today. She turned toward him, searching his face for something, weakness maybe or lies. But all she found was steadiness. You're not what I thought, she said. Neither are you. They stood there in silence, watching the wind move through the grass like a whisper. Behind them, the girls slept under a roof, no longer waiting for grief. In that silence, something shifted. Not safety. Not yet. But maybe, finally, something like home. The fire started just before dawn. Dane smelled it first, smoke, sharp and bitter, cutting through the cold morning like a knife. He was already halfway to the barn when he saw the flames licking skyward, orange against the deep blue of a waking sky. The dry timber caught fast. Within seconds the roof collapsed inward. He turned and shouted toward the house. Nell bolted through the front door, eyes wide, dragging Mercy behind her. Lacey was already halfway to the well, bucket swinging. She didn't scream. She moved with purpose, braid undone, skirts soaked from dew. She had the look of someone who had outrun too many nights to be surprised by one more. Back wall's gone, Dane said, coughing through the smoke. Get the girls behind the house. They did this, Lacey said, voice sharp with fury. They came back. He didn't ask who. He knew. They worked through the blaze, heaving water onto scorched beams, trying to keep the wind from carrying the fire to the house. Dane's arms burned from the effort. Blisters broke open and bled. Smoke clawed at his throat. But he didn't stop. Couldn't. This place was no longer just timber and soil. It had become something else. A thin-boned hope, built quiet and slow. By the time the sun crested the ridge, the barn was a blackened carcass. The animals were safe. The house had held. But everything else, the tools, the seed sacks, the winter stock, was ash. The youngest cried when she saw the old swing gone. Nell stood with her arms folded, jaw clenched, eyes damp. Lacey didn't cry. She stared at the smoking ruin like it owed her something. "We should go after them," she said. "We don't know who it was." "We do." Dane sat on the porch steps, chest heaving. "And if we chase every ghost, we'll never finish anything worth keeping." She turned to him. "And if we don't, they'll burn the rest." He met her stare. She was right. But he'd lived long enough to know that fury spent fast. What came after mattered more. That evening the wind shifted. The air felt clean again. They didn't speak much over dinner. Bread, salt, and dried peaches. Dane chewed slowly, eyes on the fire. He wasn't thinking about the barn anymore. He was thinking about the names that had never been said in this house. The ones that mattered. After the table was cleared, Lacey lingered behind. "Why'd you never ask?" He looked up. "Ask what?" "Our last name. Didn't think it mattered." "Not here." "Well," she said, voice gentler than usual, "it does. To us." He nodded. "And yours is?" "Mathis," she said. "Mama's was Mathis before she married into trouble." Dane let the name sit between them for a long moment. "Mine's Callahan." Lacey exhaled slowly. "It fits." That night, Dane didn't sleep. He sat out on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching shadows stretch and collapse as the moon climbed. He'd lived through wars and fires, lost a wife and child, survived seasons that took better men. But nothing rattled him like the idea of losing this patch of dirt, this strange family of 3 girls who had once been auctioned like cattle and now moved through his house like it was stitched from their own skin. In the morning they buried what was left of the barn tools. Mercy helped. Nell dug a hole for the old pitchfork like she was laying someone to rest. Lacey stood back, arms crossed, until Dane handed her a stone and nodded toward the grave. She placed it on top. No words. Just that. By noon something had changed in the air. Not safety. Not peace. But a decision. Lacey found Dane working on the fence post, hands blistered and raw. "You could have left us," she said. "Should have." He didn't stop hammering. Didn't want to. "Why?" He set the hammer down and looked at her, really looked. "Because you came here broken and brave. And every day you stay, you rebuild something I thought was gone for good." She stepped closer, not breaking his gaze. "You want us to stay? I want you to choose." She nodded once. "I already did." The next Sunday, a traveling preacher came down the trail. Dusty boots, crooked hat, and a Bible worn down to soft leather. He didn't ask questions, just raised an eyebrow when Dane said, "We'd like to speak some vows." Lacey stood in a borrowed dress, plain and red, her hair braided with twine. She didn't wear flowers. Didn't smile much. But when Dane took her hand, she gripped his like a woman drowning had found something solid. "There's no ring," she said. "I never needed one," he replied. "But you'll carry my name if you want it." "And if I don't?" "Then stay anyway." She blinked slow, the firelight in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "I'll take it." The preacher nodded, said the words, pronounced the bond, not romantic, not rushed, but something steadier. A pact made in ash and stubbornness. Mercy clapped. Nell grinned. The sky turned gold behind them. Dane and Lacey stood side by side on the porch that night, arms brushing. The girls slept inside, door bolted, home warm. "You ever think it'd come to this?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I'm glad it did." And he meant it. Because sometimes the fire doesn't just burn things down. Sometimes, it clears the land for something better to grow.